Bruce, let's go home. So, so much of what I talk about tends to be something I find or see on social media, which is it's really bad that I get so much of my media comes from like Facebook and Twitter, YouTube. But I mean, I don't read books anymore, which is bad. That's why I've been ordering books on Amazon, because I'm not reading enough books. Anyway, so I read this one thing on a group that I follow on Facebook, the Thomas Sowell Foundation, and I've really been meaning to read some Thomas Sowell. I've seen videos of his stuff. I've listened to audio book excerpts of his stuff, but I really want to read some of his stuff. I know he's written a bunch of stuff, but anyway, on this group, the Thomas Sowell group. Why would you? This idiot just cut me off like a clown. I gotta put on my brakes now, because anyway, and he's not even going 60. What a fucking clown. Douche nozzle. Anyway, so this group I follow, Thomas Sowell Foundation or Thomas Sowell Appreciation or whatever, some group that likes Thomas Sowell. Somebody posted a picture on there and asked for thoughts from people in the group. It was a picture, it was a graphic that showed two hands sort of reaching out for one another, a black hand, and I mean black as in monochrome, and this is monochrome, black and white, not brown skin and pink skin, black and white hand reaching for one another. And it said, conservatives say it didn't happen to me, so I don't care, whereas liberals say it shouldn't happen to anyone, and that's why I care. And this is kind of this got like a lot of responses on the Thomas Sowell Foundation, because most people on Thomas Sowell would say, they're libertarian, they're capitalists, that kind of thing, right? But anyway, I gotta go. This guy, come on, buddy, make your turn. And yeah, people who don't, you shouldn't turn into the outside lane. That's a moving violation in Ontario. Actually, I think it's a moving violation in Canada. It's probably a moving violation in the United States. You shouldn't make a left turn into the outside lane. You cause accidents that way. And jag off. Anyway, so this thing that was on the Thomas Sowell page, it got a lot of responses, obviously, from people who are libertarian and conservative and the whole bit. And it got me thinking, you know what, like, this doesn't really hold true. Now, when we think of helping people, we think of people who are in need, right? So I wouldn't even consider myself a conservative. I consider myself a liberal, but I'm a liberal on the libertarian side of it, or a classic liberal, as Dave Rubin would put it, and plenty of others. But I believe in individual liberty, but I also believe in an individual's responsibility to help his fellow man. And what really kind of doesn't jive with this whole little graphic image that was put up there with the phrase is that the fact of the matter is Christians are mostly conservative, or conservatives count more Christians among them than liberals do. And Christians by far give most to charity. They give most to charity not just through their church, but through other groups as well. Conservatives tend to belong to mutual societies like the Lions Club and the Shriners and the Masons and stuff like that, right? So they give more through charity, and they tend to do more acts of charity as well. Now, I'm not Christian. I'm not conservative. I mean, some people would accuse me of being conservative. I kind of am. I guess, I don't know. I'm a classic liberal, but anyway, I'm atheist, and I tend to give to charity. I tend to give to charities of a universalist nature. So I don't necessarily help out in a church, obviously. I don't devote time to like a soup kitchen, but I donate a lot of things to causes. For instance, like I donate lots of clothes and things like that. But also my wife and I, we tend to donate to sort of universal causes, like, actions to fight cures, to find cures for diseases and stuff like that. We donate actual money to that sort of stuff, right? Which I'm sure everybody does, but the responses on this Thomas Sowell page were really, and I mean, I'll admit, I responded the same way. I said, no, conservatives volunteer their help, liberals volunteer the help of others. And what I meant by that was basically, conservatives see an injustice going on, or they see somebody who is needy, right? And they tend to donate money, or they tend to donate food, or they tend to donate to the cause to help that needy person. But the mindset from the liberal is that nobody should ever have to go through those things. Nobody should starve. Nobody should, ever have to live on the street. So therefore, we need to take government action in order to make sure those things don't happen. The thing is, liberals and Democrats and people on that side of the spectrum, they've been trying to do that for decades and decades, using government action to basically take money from some people in order to help out the needy. To the point where now, mutual societies, they do work, but they don't do as much of the heavy lifting in terms of charitable work as they used to, because government does so much more of it. And my view is we should go back to a time when, private institutions, charitable institutions that were formed for charitable purposes, are taking care of that sort of stuff. If you want to volunteer your time or volunteer your money to help somebody who's needy, that's great, and everybody should, right? But it's kind of like the government action, or the liberals' point of view, is everybody needs to chip in to help out these poor needy people, and only government can take care of that, and we need to force people to chip in, and hence you get the welfare state, right? And I think the welfare state is wrong, because I think socialism is economic violence. You don't have a right to the fruits of my labor. I'll donate to a cause. But for you to come to me and say, give us the money so we can send this boy to school, or give us the money so that we can, pay for this guy's operation, or give us the money so we can feed this family, or else we'll lock you up, which is essentially what it comes down to. And, my friends who are on the other side, they're like, so you're saying taxation is theft? And I'm like, well, isn't it? I mean, it's the very least extortion. Give us this money under threat of violence. We're going to come to your house and lock you up. Or we're going to garnish your wages, or what have you, right? I mean, payroll taxes are essentially, they're a racket. They're garnishing wages to, the mafia that is government. Anyway, that's just my thought on it. But the thing is, I think if you asked a liberal a question along the lines of, so do you think people should be forced to give to charity? I think the first response to most liberals would be, well, no, you shouldn't be forced to. Most people would think, I don't think people should be forced to give their money to charity. Without, drawing the connection. Your initial response would be, wouldn't be to draw the connection between government and socialist policies, the socialized welfare, socialized medicine, that sort of thing, and charity, right? They just think that it's part of everybody's job in society to pay taxes, and those taxes go to help the needy, and yada yada yada. They've been doing it for so long that they just think this is how it's done. They don't realize that for the longest time, it's only recent history that this is the way it's been done. For the longest time, people took care of other people first, their families first. So if your family was in need, your cousin needed money, your brother needed money, whatever, you'd help them out, right? Your grandparent needed a place to live because they couldn't take care of themselves. They moved into a home. They moved into, a family member's home. This is the way it was done, right? It was your family first, your community second, and then your country later, or your state or your country or your the larger community later, or a separate cause, a cause that was separate to your own specific community. So, and that was done through tithing, right? That was done in churches. Churches used to do community work. They used to help. They used to build hospitals, for crying out loud, and they used to build orphanages. Right? This was the mandate of churches. This is the mandate of, and that's part of the reason why churches are tax exempt. Because, well, one, there's a separation of church and state, and two, most of the work that churches do are charitable in nature. Except now they're not really. They're for the churches exist to proliferate the church, right? The fact that they do charitable work at this point is kind of like, it's almost like gravy, right? They do it because it's still expected of them. And two, they have an excess of funds, and they don't provide any other service apart from sermons. So, right? They're all profit. Anyway, I just it's hard for me to it's hard for liberals and conservatives to have a dialogue about the nature of socialism and socialized social benefits and social programs when we look at each other as being diametrically opposed on these issues. Because I think most people, if you ask them, regardless of their political affiliation, do you think people should be forced to give to charity? Their initial reaction would be no, they shouldn't. But for the seasoned politico, who understands what the question is coming from a conservative, they might go, yes, I believe that that's what welfare is all about. And they see nothing wrong with it. But if you brought it down to a personal scale, if you said to a liberal, do you think it's okay for the local pastor of the church to come to your house, knock on the door, and have two heavily muscled deacons standing there saying, we're collecting for, old Miss Macaulay, her husband's dead, and she doesn't have any means of support, so we're collecting money. Pay up. And if you don't pay up, then, Daniel and Michael here are going to give you what for. I think if you asked them to look at that on a personal level, if somebody knocked on your door and said, we're collecting for this charity, and if you don't give it to us, you're going to have hell to pay, they'd realize that that's not right. So I think the conversation in terms of getting liberals who stand in support of social programs and social systems like that is to put in their mind a scenario. Now, I don't think, there may be an argument to say, well, that's not the same as paying taxes. But it is. It really is the same as paying taxes. Especially in a system where you have a redistributive, I think that I said it right, a redistributive form of taxation, where some money is taken from some people and directly goes to other people. There's an argument to be made that collecting taxes for city infrastructure and maintaining the good of the community in terms of its smooth functioning, its safety, that kind of thing. Those are reasonable arguments for taxes because everybody benefits. You fucking clown! Don't stop in the middle of an intersection. Jag off. Anyway, so there's an argument to be made for those, but the argument to say we're going to take money from you and give it to somebody else because it's the decent moral thing to do, and if you don't do it, you're an immoral person and you deserve to be locked up. there isn't an argument for government-run charity, which is socialized medicine, socialized housing, socialized food in the form of like food stamps, or even just, you know, monetary welfare. There's no argument for it. And a lot of my friends will say, who know that I'm a fan of Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell and that sort of, you know, view of economics, will say, well, Milton Friedman was for, you know, guaranteed basic income. Well, no, he wasn't. Not exactly. He was for negative income tax. Negative income tax has its own problems, but it's not guaranteed basic income. But people liken it to being the same thing. And I guess, you know, there could be some sort of workable mashup between guaranteed basic income and negative income tax. Look up those terms if you're unfamiliar with either of them. But in either case, neither one is right. The hope from Milton Friedman with the negative income tax was that it would replace a welfare system. But the problem is that the welfare system as established in the United States is so entrenched that there's no way you could do it until you just basically canceled welfare altogether. And you couldn't really do that at this point unless you're willing to take the money you saved from paying out welfare and invest it in hiring and training more cops. Because, like it or not, people who are used to getting stuff for free, when they stop getting it for free, they need to get money somewhere. Some of them are going to get jobs. They'd be forced to. As a matter of fact, I'd like to think that most of them would be forced to find work of some nature. But others would just say, screw it. You know, I'm not used to providing for myself. I've been provided for by the government this entire time. And I'll be damned if I'm going to start providing for myself again. I mean, that sounds like a terrible sentiment, but it's simple. It's simple fact. I mean, you subsidize bad behavior. It's so dark in here. Here we go. You subsidize bad behavior, you get more bad behavior, right? So, yeah. So, my friend who's, you know, was a Bernie supporter will say, "Well, how would you solve the problems?" And I was like, "What problems?" And he was like, "Well, income inequality for one." And I was, you know, I don't see income inequality as being a bad thing. I don't think it's wrong that some people make more money than other people, right? That's an indication of some people working harder, some people being more inventive, some people being more creative, some people having better talent, some people having better skills, right? But you know, I told him, here's what you need to do if you want to solve problems in the United States. It's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be pleasant, but you need to close the borders and or eliminate minimum wage. I know that sounds terrible. And or eliminate welfare. See, if you eliminate the minimum wage, workers can now compete on the same scale as illegal workers, illegal immigrants who are working for below minimum wage. And if you close the borders, you won't get any more illegal workers coming in and working for less. And if you eliminate welfare, then there's going to be plenty of people who are unskilled available to work, right? If companies could pay their workers what the value of the job they're doing, as opposed to, you know, what the government mandates they must pay them, they would be able to be more liquid, more more agile with their assets, and they would be able to, you know, invest in an expansion of their business. Right? They could hire more workers. They could expand. They could expand their operation. Anyway, I mean, I go on about it, and I have to go into great detail about it. It's probably something for a prepared scripted video where I write down my thoughts. But Anyway, I know everything I'm saying about that sounds terrible. It sounds like completely inhumane, and how could you want to eliminate the minimum wage? Well, minimum wage, it's not up to the state to decide what two people decide they want to trade their labor for, or trade their, what somebody wants to try to trade their labor for to an employer. There's lots of videos about, why the minimum wage, one, doesn't help unskilled workers. It actually keeps them out of the labor market. And two, doesn't do anything to really improve labor participation. All it does is help those people who already have a job and are not in danger of losing it to make more money. But at the expense of other people, right? So, anyway, I could do a whole video on minimum wage and why it shouldn't be there. But, I just want to relay my thoughts on this Thomas Sowell thing, because when it comes right down to it, I think liberals have a different idea in their mind of how the world is and how they think it ought to be. Conservatives tend to look at things as how they actually are, and this is a biased assessment, of course, but how things actually are and what the trade-offs are. Conservatives understand that there's no perfect world. There's no ending poverty. There's no ending inequality. You're never going to be able to do it. You just won't, because people are different. So all you can do is make trade-offs. You can decide which is the best outcome in a given situation. And you have to compare, what would happen if we did this? And you have to be able to think, A to Z thinking as opposed to just A to B thinking. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So much policy that is put forward by people on the left is decided on what sounds nice and what it's intended to accomplish, as opposed to what it actually results in. Right? And I mean, again, you can go and look at Thomas Sowell or Milton Friedman or any of those guys and get a better explanation of what I'm saying. But I think fundamentally, liberals and conservatives, left wing, right wing, they don't want to see people suffer. They just have different ideas about, how to go about approaching people suffering. Liberals want to solve a problem, make sure it's never a problem again, which is unfeasible. Never a problem for anybody again. And conservatives are more realistic about it. Look, there's going to be poor people. You need to help them on an individual basis. You need to help those people who are poor. You need to help those people who truly cannot help themselves. Instead of setting up a system which encourages indigence, which encourages people to not fend for themselves, and creates an entire class of people who become reliant on the state at the expense of people who are self-reliant. Anyway, 23 minutes. This is a long video. I'm home now. I gotta start making dinner. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.